Good morning. Hello and welcome to Common Sense Matters, a program sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party to discuss the issues of the day and taking an alternate view to the Tennessee GOP supermajority. My name is Sandy Rice. I'm expecting Tessa Hill to join me this morning, and also Mariah Phillips will be joining by phone in a few minutes. Tessa is a Franklin County nurse and mom and part of the executive committee of the county party here, and Mariah is a former teacher of government and is a candidate for U.S. Congress in our District 4. Many of us worked with her on her campaign in 2019. Today we're going to talk about another supermajority Tennessee legislation passed law at the very special. We're getting pretty good at special sessions, but this was about education in 2021, and that was the passage of the Prohibitive Concepts Law. We've got a lot of difficult concepts this morning to go through, so if you want to call in for questions, you can do that. We're going to talk about critical race theory. Tennessee was one of the first states to respond to a national hysteria about critical race theory. So I'm going to give you some definitions about what this is and how it's impacting or is thought to impact the teaching of history in our schools. So critical race theory, or CRT, argues that historical patterns of racism are ingrained in law and other modern institutions, as well as other aspects of American life. For example, the treatment of Native Americans, Reconstruction, education, the GI Bill, home ownership, restriction of voter access, and gerrymandering, to name just a few. These are inequalities in our history that are racist. Critical race theory is a concept. Once the domain of graduate schools, some observers say it is now influencing American K-12 curriculums. The theory argues that historical patterns of racism are ingrained in law and other modern institutions, and that the legacies of slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow still create an uneven playing field for Black people and other people of color. The idea is that racism is not a matter of individual bigotry, but is systemic in America. CRT is a way to look at how our history has created these inequalities that now can be almost effortlessly reproduced unless we look at how they happened. It's not about bad people. The problem is a system that reproduces bad outcomes. Okay, it's a map for change to eliminate the harmful effects of racism. We have done things that have hurt people, and we need to move forward and eliminate racism from our future actions. Okay, so critical race theory is a very difficult concept to understand. It's felt to be an advanced concept for law school, graduate studies in history, government, sociology, and not really applicable to the study of history, grades K through 12. I'm just going to take a second here and get the phone number to my call-in. Sorry. Sorry for the dead space, y'all. Our number here, if Mariah is listening, is 931-967-2201. Is that right? Okay. Let's see if Mariah can get that. But because there were reports of children going home crying, calling their mothers racist, and thinking they were racist, the legislature passed the Prohibitive Concepts Law to protect our children. So this was after COVID, um, which was a bad time for schools across the state, across the country. Um, Scores, reading and math scores were falling. A lot of kids were missing school. School was in, school was out. There wasn't any continuity, and these were some of the things that the special session was meeting about. But instead of supporting students' education and teachers in our state, the legislature decided to make things more difficult. Now, Tennessee ranks number 33 in education and number 42 in teacher pay, just as a couple examples that we continue to struggle with. There may be examples of, okay, here we go. Hey, Mariah.
Hey.
Sorry about the numbers.
What's that?
Sorry about the number. What were you
That's okay.
missing?
Yeah, it's fine. I found it right when you sent it to me.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay. I don't know if you heard my introduction about CRT, critical race theory, but I tried to give some definitions, of what that is, and the prohibitive concepts law.
Yeah.
So I was saying that there may be some examples of kids going home upset, feeling like they were responsible for slavery or other negative things. I don't know how that is happening. That might have been more of an individual discussion with the school, but our legislature decided to make a law with punitive consequences of withholding funding. That's a popular one for schools.
Yeah.
And, punishing teachers. I don't think maybe firing them, but just reducing or changing their status. I think there's also, if a child came home and felt that he or she was being accused of some aspects of our bad and sad history,
Yeah.
that could have been handled in the home. So I tried to get some current teachers, but they're all teaching on a Friday morning.
Yes, they are all teaching right now. And I'm a former teacher, very somebody who I would say in my role both in teaching U.S. government and personal finance, I spoke a lot about kind of some of the structural inequalities that existed both in both of those subjects, right?
Okay.
U.S. government and personal finance. And so I kind of joke that, and I say kind of a joke, I feel like I would be one of those teachers who would be getting punished for this law if I was teaching today. Because I think it's really important that students, if we want to teach them how to think critically, that we do expose them to facts, to statistics, to information that actually technically could be considered banned under this prohibitive law. And I will make one correction. Teachers can get fired.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And I know that because there was actually a teacher, and I forget his name, and excuse me, but there's a teacher in East Tennessee who was fired in 2021 for simply leading a discussion, before this was even a law, for leading a discussion with his students that basically he was playing a little devil's advocate, getting his students to think a little bit deeper. And he wasn't the one making the statements, but he was challenging the students with the statements they were making. And because there was a conversation of race, there was a conversation of about inequality, he was fired.
Okay.
and is still going through the court system to try to get his job back or get some kind of restitution for the fact that they fired him. So teachers can get fired for teaching things that some parents are uncomfortable with.
Okay. I couldn't make it through this system to see if the law itself had been applied.
Yes. Well, again, he was fired before the law even existed, so it's kind of a predecessor to the law.
So tell me about your experience. Now, you taught high school students, but hopefully we can break it down. I can get your opinion on like what first, second, and third graders, how you teach history
I taught
to
high school,
them.
And there is some in your description for critical race theory, which I think was a good description. The context of CRT was designed for graduate level education, actually, so not even undergraduate college. And so, but some of the concepts, especially when it revolves around social emotional learning, wanting students to be comfortable in their skin, finding, being a safe space, which the classroom has always been considered a safe space for many students throughout time. And I say always, of course, it's also been not a safe space for some. So I don't want to leave that out. But, teachers have, just because of the nature of who becomes a teacher, teachers have been places where students have been able to come, ask difficult questions, really identify. That's what I loved about being a high school teacher, is as people were learning who they are, I was there to kind of help answer their questions and make them feel okay with that exploration. The younger the students are, there has been, over the last couple of years, more focus on that social emotional learning, which stems a lot from anti-bullying behaviors, focus on mental health, which is, in the United States, has been a huge issue because it's been a huge problem in the United States for several years that continues to get worse. And so we've been, kind of younger and younger having this conversation around social emotional learning, which could introduce books into classrooms that children can identify with. So you may have a book about Ruby Bridges, who was a little girl who integrated her elementary school. And I know that that's a book that has been challenged through this prohibitive concepts idea. But if there's a book written for 8-year-olds about an 8-year-old who in 1954 experienced segregation and racism while she was integrating her local school, I think that's a really important history lesson. And it's a really important lesson for all students to learn, when you think an 8-year-old standing up for yourself, not, being able to be strong and how to address a bully. All of those concepts are dealt with in this book about Ruby Bridges.
Okay. I think that two books that I looked at have been banned, and they're regarding gay parents. Is another. Wow, I think some of our legislature should be held under the prohibitive concepts law for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I actually, in preparation for this conversation today, I actually read Tennessee Code Annotated 49.6.1019. That's the code that, for anybody who is wonky and wants to look it up, I encourage you to do so. Tennessee Code Annotated 49.6.1019. You can just Google it. You can find it. And this is actually the list of concepts prohibited from inclusion or promotion in course of instruction. So, and this is where they talk about withholding state funds. And so there's a whole list of things that I think, everyone should agree with. One race or sex should not be taught that they're inherently superior than another race or sex.
Mm-hmm.
I can get on board with that. I don't think any race or sex should be considered superior. An individual should not be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of their race or sex. I agree with that as well. I think about how that applies to how the LGBTQ community is treated. There's an opposing law that I think, to your point, kind of breaks this code that says teachers are allowed to misgender students if they want to. A teacher is allowed to, by law, call a student he or she based on their gender at birth, even if their own identity is different. And so if you are a non-binary or a transgendered student trying to work through a very difficult season of life, mm-hmm. and your teachers, the ones who are responsible for helping you be that safe space, are allowed to bully you and misgender you and misidentify you, what does that teach about what they should be facing in society? Mm-hmm. And it breaks Tennessee Code annotated because they are being discriminated against and receiving adverse treatment, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting how we're contradicting ourselves even in when we look at different groups and we're writing these laws. We're not thinking about the impact that it's going to have on other classes of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I just took one. There are 14 in the law, and I just had one example. So the forward is that the law prohibits this concept from being a course of instruction, and that is promoting division between or resentment of a race, sex, religion, creed, nonviolent political affiliation, social class, or class of people. I don't even know what that means. I don't know how to interpret that, and they're all like that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I can agree with. I don't want to teach as an educator. I don't want to promote division between people. But the law, the way that it is, not just the way that it's written with very ambiguous.
It's vague.
Language, but the execution, right? That teachers are supposed to follow this, and school districts are supposed to follow this, makes it even more complicated, because what I think is promoting division is different than what my neighbor might think.
Right.
Is promoting division. So even understanding the concepts of what promotes division, what is considered a nonviolent political affiliation,
right.
For example, mm-hmm. Black Lives Matter, that organization, as an organization, is a nonviolent political organization.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
The people who showed up at the January 6th rally on the Capitol,
were violent.
Some of those people considered that their intention to be a nonviolent political affiliation.
Okay.
Right? Some the people that showed up to that, some of them considered that.
But some of them were violent.
Well,
and went with violence.
Some people showed up for violence, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that's where it gets really touchy, uh-huh. because who is interpreting the law is going to determine how this law is executed.
Uh-huh. Well, I wonder.
That's what gets really difficult.
Well, I wondered how the nonviolent political affiliation would relate to just protesting. I think about the kids in some areas of our state who are going to school board meetings and screaming and yelling. I mean, I just don't think they check that at home. That's got to be discussed, if not at the dinner table, but around the house. They hear their parents with these attitudes. And again, going to your safe classroom space and social emotional learning, I would think you'd have to discuss that. At least in high school. I don't know about the younger grades, little children, but you know that's affecting them somehow.
Absolutely.
And then there were a lot of children at the Capitol with the special session on gun reform.
Yes.
So they were nonviolent political affiliations.
Yeah,
so.
and to think that such a social movement is happening literally in this moment, to not be able to talk about it really loses an opportunity to educate our young people. To not be able to talk about something that's happening right now, or even to talk about historical things that have happened, and removing race or gender or the idea of oppression or supremacy as a concept out of education. How do you talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1965 and not talk about racism?
Right. But
you can't talk about it. Rosa Parks was not arrested on a bus because she didn't follow a police officer's order.
Right.
I mean, she was, but there's a little bit more context that informs the conversation when it comes to learning about history.
Right.
And this law prohibits that. So when I was teaching, there was still is a curriculum called Facing History and Ourselves, and it was teaching history through the lens of different viewpoints. And allowing people to see, what others were experiencing, to develop empathy, to develop problem solving, to develop critical thinking, to find some deeper context around some of these difficult things that have happened in our past. Not to make anyone feel shameful or embarrassed, because it's, as a white woman, it wasn't my fault that racism existed. That's 100 years ago. And it's not my fault that racism continues to exist today. Sorry, that's true. But I'm also sorry that it's true. It is my responsibility as an individual to do what I can to keep racism from impacting coming from me and the people that are impacting me.
Okay.
Right, and the people that I impact, right? So teaching about it and helping people to see it is how we help to overcome it and provide space for people who are experiencing it. But we're not allowed to do that as teachers under this prohibitive law.
So that kind of leaves the parents needing to have the wherewithal to discuss it at home.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering.
And parents are.
Okay.
But the parents are having that conversation, and whether directly or indirectly, parents are influencing their children, whether it's directly or indirectly, right? If they're taking direct action, a good example is the Moms for Liberty group, right? I know that we hear about this. This law and laws similar to this come from organizations like Moms for Liberty, who are putting a lot of intense pressure on our legislators to pass bills like this. So I was actually listening to a podcast by a Moms for Liberty group about this law, just to kind of hear what they were saying. And they've been researching curriculum, researching textbooks that are being taught in Tennessee. They have been line by line pushing this message at our libraries, at our public schools. They've been asking for open records requests for teachers' lesson plans to find out what books are being shared, and they're taking note. These moms for liberty are taking note of what's being taught in our classroom. So you can imagine they're having those conversations with their students, with their own kids at home. Right?
Okay. What do you imagine that conversation is?
Well, according to the podcast, that anti-American publishers are sending this anti-American, anti-white message into our classroom and indoctrinating our children. That's the message that they're sharing to their kids.
Okay.
So then their kids are coming home and reporting that they were taught about Ruby Bridges, or they read a book that had, two dads.
Mm-hmm.
And Moms for Liberty, that's where they're taking action, right? But conversations about race and about gender and about all of these topics are being taught, again, directly and indirectly at home. But the problem is the lessons aren't based on any empathy or critical thinking, or you know what I mean? It's not taught in the same way that a teacher would break down conversation and help the students to think deeper about a subject, because that's a teacher's job.
So how do you teach? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the Moms for Liberty group has really been putting pressure on legislators since prior to 2021, but that's where it really jumped in. In Rutherford County, where I live, we're banning books at our public library. We banned 4 last month. We did save 2 of them this past month in September, but for the last 2 months, we've now had books being banned. Prior to this, I think we've banned 1 book in our library in the last 10 years.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, 4 books in 1 month. And these aren't books that are brand new on the shelf. These are books that have been sitting on the shelf for years, that all of a sudden are getting attention from groups like this applying pressure.
I think it is interesting with there was a movement prior, many years ago, about violence on television, or concepts that parents didn't want the kids to see on television. And I just thought, well, turn off the television. I mean, we talk about freedom and lack of government intervention. We don't want government in our health care. I've been a big proponent for health care for all, but we don't want the government there. But this was the reaction to the books. If you don't want your child to read a book, then don't let them check it out of the library or take it back to the library.
Yeah.
Now,
well, that applies to the library, but I think there is an element in public education where if a book is assigned, then read out loud in class, then the parents would argue that they don't have the choice because it's read out loud in class or assigned to their child for homework. But I think that there is this point of sensitivity that if someone calls out something as systemically racist, if there's a problem where race or some kind of discrimination is a trend, and it is called out as a trend, then people take offense to it, and instead of looking at, is this actually a trend? Is there a problem here? They take offense to it, and that's kind of what we're facing right now. And I think that goes back to I did a research project when I was teaching. My graduate school project was reducing recidivism at the alternative school, because that was a passion of mine, and how to do that. And one of the things that I did was I researched the reasons why students were expelled from school.
Mm-hmm.
And Rutherford County is a fairly diverse community, and when I looked at students that were expelled for zero-tolerance offenses, it was pretty on par with the racial spread in the community. So, for example, if a student was expelled for drugs or weapons, it pretty much lined up with the racial demographics of the community, right? So, 20% of those expelled were African American, 60% were white, 10% were Hispanic, 10% were Asian, other groups. So it kind of fell according to the demographics of the community. But if you looked at who was expelled for behavioral offenses that were less defined, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You were 5 times more likely to be expelled if you were an African American male.
Okay.
For behavior offenses,
mm-hmm.
right? That would be disrespectful behavior to a teacher, fighting, things like that. So you can look at that statistic. Now, that is a statistic that is fact.
Right.
Right? So you have to be able to look at that statistic, that it's true, and then you have to dig deeper to find out, why is that true? Is it true because the African American students were acting out 5 times more often? The answer to that question was no.
Mm-hmm.
It was that students who were African American got expelled more frequently for those behaviors than their white counterparts. That was true. A white student could go to the office and then get dismissed back to class, or maybe get 1 day of suspension. There were some disparities in how those students were treated once they got into trouble.
Right.
And so when I look at that statistic, I have to see that there are deeper things connected to why some students are getting sent back to class after disruptive behavior, and some students were getting sent to the alternative school. If I address that fact based on the statistics that are playing out, then we're going to have some difficult conversations about systemic injustice,
right,
when it comes to race in our education system, and then in the disciplinary system, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Right?
Right.
But because of this law, we're not allowed to talk about it.
Right. Right. Well,
So,
the other thing is
yeah.
I think Moms for Liberty, and a lot of this comes from white people, I'm going to say. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say that it does, but I also think it comes from more minority communities getting access to this information and speaking out about getting the confidence and the positional authority to speak out about it.
To oppose it.
Yeah. And to bring it to light,
okay.
Right?
Because
go ahead.
I was going to ask, Tessa apparently has been waylaid, but both of you, I wanted to kind of flip the discussion, because you both mothers of children of color, so kind of the
Yes.
opposite. I mean, I know your kids are growing up so fast. What have they told you? In the past about, have they felt discriminated against, or have their feelings been hurt?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of these conversations with my own kids growing up. My kids are biracial. I'm white. Derek is black. We've been very open. No surprise, no hiding. I think more indirectly, like I remember one day I was picking up Sienna from her classroom early from school one day. I think I delivered cupcakes or something, and was bringing her home, and one of the little, the kid said, "Is that your mom?" Kind of surprised that Sienna's mom was white. And she was like, "Yeah." And then that was it, right? There was nothing further than that other than, but that struck her. Like, why did she not think you were my mom? Like, but I think she was in the second grade or so. But it definitely stuck with the fact that both Xavier and Isaiah are at the magnet school. Xavier graduated many years ago, but he was when he was at the magnet school, there were only 8 black students in his graduating class at the magnet school. And most of those students, not all of them, but most of them were biracial. And he noticed that. He did not have any direct adverse experiences, but I think there was one example that I want to share. When he was in the 4th grade, there was a pretty transformative experience for me, just really in my awareness of how this can impact. 4th grade is when students learn a lot about Tennessee history, right? In every state, they learn about their state's history in the 4th grade. Well, I remember going on a field trip to a plantation in Franklin, and I'll leave out the name of it, but I went to this plantation in Franklin, and I remember listening to the tour guide talk so romantically about the soldiers who, died fighting on behalf of the South. And this particular plantation had been a hospital for the Southern soldiers, and so it was, they were very connected to that history, that part of history, which is a very real part. And I remember thinking about the compassion that they had for people who, in my education, I thought of as, they were the rebels. They were the enemy of America, right, of the North, which ended up being the victors in the fight in the Civil War. And I just remember, like, they're teaching this in this way, romanticizing the soldiers of the South, and who are there to protect their way of life. And that infiltration of thinking that exists in education in the South. And then he went back and had to, they had a debate in his 4th grade classroom. And great education practices, and I still have a little bit more time. I know we're watching the clock for me, but Xavier was born, or is born, on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And that has always been something he's been very proud of. As kind of a nerdy kid that loves history, being born on Abraham Lincoln's birthday, a huge deal, right? Loved Abraham Lincoln. He was a hero for him when he was younger. So 4th grade Xavier, being the only black student in his class, and remember he's only half black, right? But the only black student in his class in the 4th grade, was asked by his teacher to, in this debate, to argue for the side of the South. And his reason was, the teacher's reason for arguing for the side of the South is he thought it would be really interesting to see a black man argue for the side of the South.
Wow.
Now, there were many ways he could have presented that to Xavier to make it much less about race. It could have been, you know so much about the side of the North. I think it would be good for you to, you knew a lot about the side of the Union. It would be good for you, a good critical thinking exercise for you to develop arguments, opposing viewpoints. That's good critical thinking, lessons. But to tell a 4th grade student who is 9 that they should argue for the side of the South, argue to protect slavery because it would be interesting to see a black man argue that point, that I had a problem with that.
Yeah, and what did you do about that? Did you call your
legislator? I did go to the teacher and the principal, and God bless him. This teacher he needed to retire.
Oh, okay.
And he was forced to retire after that interaction, and they replaced that teacher with a young African American female teacher who is now a lead principal in a school in Nashville and doing a great job. But that was, she replaced him in this classroom, and it changed Xavier's just view on education and his experience in that classroom moving forward. It was his first black teacher, only one of two he ever had. But that was something like a teacher saying that to a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
But that's how ingrained it is, and so it was interesting. But I do say my kids were very fortunate that they didn't have any major direct instances other than that where they were impacted. But I also taught them to speak up and to speak out and to not accept poor behavior by their teachers, by their friends. I'm their mom. They know how to stand up for themselves.
Yeah. Well, and
so I teach them that from a very young age.
Well, I think that what Moms for Liberty and this law is doing is really dangerous, and they need to back off, and I don't think that they will. The other thing is, I'm going to at the very end here. When we're talking about announcements, I know I need to let you go for your meeting, is that the legislature listens to some people. This is a group of women versus all the people protesting at the special session. I mean, they just kind of cherry pick who they're going to listen to, and it's not necessarily the numbers. It's just the hysteria, as well as whatever. My question is this what parents want? Well, there's a few parents that want this very vague law and teacher punishment and all that kind of stuff, but the majority of people don't even know about it. I think I read somewhere in my research that like 90% of parents don't even know what the charter school and all that private school money and the educational ESAs or ESRs or whatever they are, it is going on. So, I wish I had some nice, closing for our discussion today, but I think we're just at this point going to need to just say, be aware of this and be prepared to see what's going on, and parents to think about how you can talk about things to your kids, because the law is being there's a lawsuit by the Teachers Education Association about the prohibitive law here, but they're concerned that students will fall behind their peers in other states in adulthood if this law stays on the books. So they're going to be, graduating, going to college, being in a diverse atmosphere, and they're going to be, they're going to be clueless as the rest of the country kind of moves towards resolution of our problems regarding inequality in our country.
Absolutely. As businesses and organizations are embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion instruction and procedures, we are actually removing it from the conversation.
Right.
And that is very dangerous. It will put our students behind. It will cause our students to have less compassion and empathy for others, which is going to be damaging for society. But it also could potentially damage the children themselves. If you are a student who does not have a safe space to walk through these conversations with their teachers and other adults of influence in their lives, there's going to be a lot more mental health problems in the future than we currently have.
Right.
So, yeah, I agree with you. It's very dangerous.
Well, the other thing is this is government telling people what to do, and
it is.
And what to think. It's indoctrination, and there's just been a lot of conversation
they're so
that.
afraid of indoctrinating people that
they're indoctrinating
systemic
them.
racism exists. They're indoctrinating them that it doesn't, and that's actually more dangerous.
Yeah.
Because it's a lack of awareness of what we're facing in society. So, Sandy, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank
as
you
always.
so much.
I appreciate what you do on the radio there, educating and informing your community on what's happening in our government, and we need more of it.
Okay.
More education.
Great. Thanks for your excellent input.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Okay. Let's see. I've got Whoops. Sorry about that little extra noise here. I've got 8:53, so seven minutes for some announcements. Like I said to Mariah, tying up this conversation, just what can we do as Democrats, as independents? I would say always my first action plan is to get involved with the county party, and I'll tell you how to do that in a little bit. It's hard to change things as an individual, certainly in your home and community. I don't want to discourage that at all, but there is power in numbers. We've got some school board elections in March, just around the corner in District 2, 4, 6, and 8. Yeah, I know March is not really around the corner. It's September. I have another caller. Do we do this? Sorry. That's okay. She's coming around. Did they hang up?
Go ahead, caller.
Hey, good morning. Hi.
Hi. I have a question, comment. When they were in the process of taking down all the Confederate monuments, you used to hear the argument being made in support of that you're erasing history.
Oh, right. Uh-huh.
Why is this not erasing history? Not being allowed to talk about our history?
Yeah. Well, I think that they're allowed to talk about the history, but they can't make anybody feel bad about it. There's good people on both sides type of concept. Thanks for your call. I'm going to go through. Bye. Let's see. School board, the first day to obtain the petition for running for school board is December 16th, and the deadline to. So school board elections are coming up. Think about taking a part in what goes on in our county. Be informed. Thanks for listening this morning. This will also be on our website and Facebook pages to listen to this if you want other of your friends and family to hear this discussion. Also, contact your elected representatives. In Franklin County, we're all Republicans, so tell them how you feel about this prohibitive law and how teachers are kind of straddled by this. Explore history with your children. We're kind of right in the middle of the Civil War. There's a lot of battlefields and things to involve your children with to learn about our history, and you control the narrative there. And getting involved with the party, I just want to make some announcements. Our next meet and greet that have been very successful is Saturday, September 30th at 5 p.m. This is at Paisan on the square, it's not really new. I ate there last night. It's really good. Usually we meet on Sundays, but the restaurant isn't open on Sundays. So we're calling this Dems and Date Night. So remember that this is a chance to be with other Democrats. We have no topic, no agenda, no assignments. We just get together, bring a significant other, a date, and some cash for food and drink. We don't provide the food, but like to support our local businesses. I know that fall is very busy, but beginning at 5, hope hope you can get away and join us for an hour and then do your other Saturday night things. Look ahead to October 22nd will be our Oktoberfest potluck beginning at 2:30. We've rented Pavilion 3 at Winchester Park. This is part of the continuation of building our Franklin County Democratic Party members. Our big thing with voting, if you listen to the last podcast, we want the Democrats to get out and vote. Voter turnout is very low and continues to be so even in the Nashville mayor's race. We may do some phone banking. That's not for everyone, but as I said, the only way to make a dent in our supermajority legislature and General Assembly is to get out and vote. Our next business meeting is on the September 26th. We're going to be on Zoom for that. We alternate Zoom and in person. To keep up with all of our events, please sign up for our monthly activities and other announcements at Franklin County TN Democrats at gmail.com. I think I had kind of mentioned about, wanted to say that the special session really on gun reform really ignored the concerns of parents and others protesting at the Capitol. Even we talked about the heavy-handedness and arrogance of the General Assembly, removing mothers concerned about the safety of their children with small signs about the size of a paper. This was declared unconstitutional against our First Amendment for free speech and the right to assemble and express grievances. Betty Fraley will be talking to Representative John Ray Clemens next month about the special session. Wanted to just mention that Gloria Johnson has been a representative for about 10 years, is running for U.S. Senate against current Senator Marsha Blackburn, who I call our national embarrassment. Our Democratic Party here is not a PAC, so we can't raise funds to contribute to her campaign, but we encourage others to donate and volunteers, and there will be opportunities to meet Gloria. She's quite an amazing person. Hopefully we can find a candidate to go up against our state senator, Janice Bowling. She's been representing our district in the state senate for several years, and she needs to go. The role of the state and county Democratic Party is to identify and elect Democratic representatives. We need to build our party and get our Democratic vote out for these upcoming competitive state races. One thing a lot of people talk about is the presidential race, always. But I want to just say that politics is local. It's difficult to affect politics on a national level. We need to concentrate on what's going on right around us. All right, I think I've gone over this time. Thanks for listening. This has been Common Sense Matters, sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party, in case you didn't notice how many times I said Democrat. Y'all have a good weekend. Bye-bye.